Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Review. I'm Phil Hargis. It's good to see you again. Preseason is in full effect here. It's been exciting watching all the preseason games. The NFL Network brings you all those games, and you can see every single one of the preseason games as they happen. Some of the most memorable things from this first weekend of the preseason games is Robert Griffin III's opening debut. He did great. He had a couple of easy passes he was able to complete. And some of the other most memorable things we saw were the Dallas Cowboys being absolutely atrocious. They were terrible. It looks like it's going to be a really long, painful season for the Dallas Cowboys. 3 points in the opening game, just really pathetic. But the preseason is still the preseason. It is not the playoffs, so don't put too much emphasis on the preseason. But nonetheless, we are here to talk about fantasy football, and the preseason sometimes gives you an indication for what's going to happen in the regular season. That's a lot of seasons to cover here on Fantasy Sports Review. We'll be with you for all of those seasons, so that's really exciting. We told you last week that we had something really insightful for you on this show. We are going to break down the strength of schedule. This is where you can go in and steal your drafts, people. This is where people go buy their draft based on last year's performance. Aaron Rodgers was the best quarterback last year. They're going to draft Aaron Rodgers number 1 this year. We are going to be here to tell you, you don't want to draft Aaron Rodgers number 1 this year. We have the secrets to success lie in predicting what's going to happen with the schedules as the NFL dictates they're going to happen for you. We're going to get into that right now. But as usual, co-host in the house, Robbie Castro. Robbie, good to see you again.
Yeah, Phil, good to see you too, man.
All right, man, thanks for the handshake, man. Wow, you've been working out or something, man. How's that personal trainer treating you?
It's great. It's actually, I feel like I can go in the NFL right now and play week 2 of the preseason for the Redskins.
I think you could hold their clipboards for the coaches.
I've put my name out there a couple times, but it's not about me. It's about the fans out there, so let's get right to it,
How
man.
important is strength of schedule to you when you draft?
Well, it's pretty big. I mean, not only because, you have certain bye weeks that you look towards. You never want to have 2 running backs have the same bye week. That crushed me last season. That crushes everybody. But it's huge. You got to take a look at, if you're going to draft a guy like Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers, you have to see the hell they're playing in the AFC. Or those matchups are critical. So especially down the stretch, playoff time, week 12, week 13, week 14. Very, very big. So, everyone, like I said, I always preach about this. I know you did too. Strength schedule is huge, especially in the NFL. A lot of things can happen from here. Up until the coming weeks. So let's get right into it, man.
Yeah, you hit on a couple things, Robbie. I just want to reiterate to the fans out there, if you're watching and you're predicting fantasy football results, this is what fantasy football strength of schedules can do for you. Yes, you can predict the early part of the schedule. Look at weeks 1 through 4. You look for the guys that have easy matchups in week 1 through 4, and those are the guys you want to draft in later rounds that you can possibly get some higher value from earlier on in the season, and they'll outperform what they should really do for the rest of the season, whether because of injuries or whatever else the reason may be. And then you look to trade those guys, and you have to make sure you stick to your plan and trade those guys after week 4. And then, yes, like Robbie was alluding to, you look at the strength of schedule for weeks 15 and 16. We know who, in general, the majority of those good defenses and who those bad defenses are going to be. Yeah, sometimes you get some surprises, like the 49ers last year were really good. But you can predict those defenses are going to be good, Robbie, in weeks 15 and 16. And you want to draft those guys that can be some backfill for you in weeks 15 and 16 that can actually propel you to a fantasy football championship. And that's what we're here to do. So we're going to start off by doing this. I did want to say one more thing, too. You talked about getting hammered with the bye weeks last week, having a couple players at the same position. I don't think you should avoid drafting players because of bye week issues. It's okay if you draft players that have the same bye week problems. I think you want to have the best players on the board. If you lose 1 game out of 14 because of a bye week problem, I think so be it. Don't downgrade your position just because of a bye week conflict you have with a better player on your team because of that. So don't worry about bye weeks too much. In fact, I almost say ignore all your bye week problems. Get the best players you can in the draft and stick with them.
Yeah, and depth's big too. I mean, you talk about like injuries, especially in the preseason. I like to have drafts that are normally towards the end of preseason, so I know who I'm taking. Obviously, you look at Ryan Matthews, a guy who's a first-round pick. He's not going to be a first-round pick anymore, a second-round pick anymore, because he's out 4 to 6 weeks with that broken collarbone. So again, it's pretty big. You want to also gauge your draft. You don't want to just base it off of just needs. You want to take the guys that you want to look at these matchups. And you want to take guys that could steal points. You can get easy touchdowns, especially in the latter part of the games. Look at Cam Newton last year in the fourth quarter. They were playing 14, 21 points behind. I mean, of course he's going to throw the ball every single down. So that's critical too. So you have to look at every little factor when gauging on who to draft. And this right here is perfect. The strength of schedule is perfect when doing so.
Exactly. And let's go and get right into it, Robbie. We have set out for you, we have ranked all the teams from number 1 down to 32, and we're starting off at the top of the list. Those guys will have the easiest strength of schedule that you can look at right here. We're going to start off with the passing game, the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the tight ends. The guys that have the easiest matchups will be at the top of the list. And something that's going to be very interesting to you guys out there is if you look at this list, the New Orleans Saints there are number 1 on the list. That means that Drew Brees based on last year's defensive stats, has the easiest passing schedule with teams, Robbie. These are teams like the Washington Redskins. Man, maybe tough. Maybe one of the better defenses out there. But yeah, then you go on to Carolina. You got teams like Green Bay, Tampa Bay. These are teams in Denver, Philadelphia. These are teams, Oakland, that you can score on. You can rack up a lot of passing yards against these teams. And Drew Brees and their defense, which is now weakened because of the suspensions, because of Bountygate. This is a team that's going to be passing for a lot of yards this year. I think Drew Brees is the #1 quarterback.
I absolutely agree with you 100% too. And you also have to look at the weapons that they have. With Jimmy Graham being the best tight end. Oh, maybe Gronkowski, but Jimmy Graham.
Watch the injury though, Jimmy Graham. We got to pay attention to that.
Well, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. But then you also look at after the bye week, they play Tampa Bay, they play Denver, Philadelphia, and Atlanta. 4 teams right there that kind of, their secondaries aren't that great. You can easily pick them apart. You know Drew Brees is going to throw for a lot of yards against those teams because he always tends to against Atlanta because they have, not a great secondary by no means. But you also have to look at, teams like Carolina Panthers. They play them twice in the season. Carolina's got one of the weakest defenses in the NFL. So if I have the 3rd pick or 4th pick and it's a toss between Rodgers and Brees, I guess you give Brees the edge because of the strength of schedule.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what this is supposed to do. Give you the slight edge to another player that looks like on paper they're going to have the easiest schedule. Then you look like a guy, you go down the bottom of this list, and you'll see New England down there. Now you're going to pass on Tom Brady. I mean, you're going to take a guy like Cam Newton over Tom Brady? Yeah, no way. You're not going to take But if you have a chance between Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady, maybe Tom Brady falls to 3. Even though on paper they do have one of the statistically, based on win-loss records last year, the Patriots have one of the easiest schedules, but maybe a harder matchups passing schedule-wise. And we also know how Bill Belichick's going to run that offense at all with the running game this year. It's a big mystery, everybody, and maybe a long shot of a chance.
Yeah, then you look at Atlanta, too. The Falcons are #2 right behind the New Orleans Saints. And you look at a guy like Matt Ryan with Julio Jones to throw to, Roddy White to throw to. There are a couple running backs and Michael Turner and Jacquizz Rodgers. I mean, those guys can really, they can light up the scoreboard. So you look at their first 5 games, and you're looking at San Diego, Denver, Carolina, Washington, Kansas City. Not great secondary, especially the Redskins. I mean, this is a team that is replacing 3 starters on defense in the secondary, so they're kind of decimated as well. So you look at that, I'm like, okay, well maybe Matt Ryan, I can pick this guy up in the 8th or 9th round, fantastic value because he's going to throw the ball. They've been working on the no huddle all offseason, so there's going to be a lot of scoring in Atlanta, and it's going to be easy points to come from.
You're absolutely right, Robbie. And not only that, but Matt Ryan's a guy that really started to turn up the Jets, at the end of last season, passing for some good yardage and some good fantasy points at the end of last season. Yeah, absolutely right. That is a perfect example. Matt Ryan is a guy that kind of falls into that 2nd or 3rd tier right there. He's a guy you can pick up. I don't know if he'll fall down to the 8th or 9th rounds, but depending on your scoring system or whatever draft you're in, yeah, he's going to fall down those draft boards, and he will be a guy that's drafted in the 8 to 12 quarterback overall, and an absolute steal of value. And like you said, Tampa Bay, Josh Freeman could be an incredible value this year, especially with Vincent Jackson coming in to sort of be the lead wide receiver down there in Tampa Bay. Freeman, was kind of overdrafted last year, going to be underdrafted this year. Tremendous value.
Yeah, the thing about Josh Freeman, though, they bring in 2 running backs. Rookie Doug Martin, who's supposed to be pretty good, can help carry the load, take some pressure off Freeman's shoulders too. So that's going to be huge too because they didn't have a real big run game last season in Tampa, and they were also playing from behind. And their wide receivers, like you said, got a tremendous boost with Vincent Jackson getting him in the offseason. So again, you look at a guy like Josh Freeman, look at a rebound from that sophomore slump. He's in his 3rd full season as an NFL quarterback. Take a flyer on that guy late, but I mean, you also look at Chicago.
I love Chicago, man. He stole my team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at him too. Jay Cutler, Brandon Marshall's back. He's a guy that he played for 3 years ago in Denver when Cutler and Marshall were making touchdowns and doing really well too. And that it just helps Jay Cutler because he's got someone he's used to throwing to in Brandon Marshall. So again, he's in the top. They're in the top 5 on this list as well. And you look at a guy like Cutler, who's gonna fall tremendously because of the season he had a year ago, being injured.
And a couple things I also see in this little Robbie though, like man, we obviously know Matt Stafford's gonna be good. He was just unstoppable at the end of last year. I mean, you cannot forget what he did at the end of last season, passing for 4 or 5, 6 touchdowns a game, whatever he was doing, blowing up with Megatron. Stafford is going to be probably the fourth or 5th quarterback off the draft board in almost all drafts. He'll probably be a little bit overdrafted because of that. But if you move down the list just a little bit further, you can get some really, really deep sleepers here, Robbie, with a guy like Alex Smith, who had a great year last year, didn't throw a lot of interceptions. They upgraded their receiver core a little bit with Randy Moss. He could be good. And, he's still, based on the strength of schedule here, I mean, they're a great team. The 49ers are awesome. They have a very deep running game now. And if they're able to perform to this type of passing expectation here and being a top 10 quarterback, Alex Smith is going to be drafted in the 10 to 15 quarterback range. That represents great value there. And then you see guys wedged between them with Seattle, all these NFC West teams. These should be shootout games. Seattle and St. Louis and Arizona, any of those guys can put up some pretty decent fantasy points for you because you're not playing against any good defenses.
Yeah, you're right. I also look towards a team like the Arizona Cardinals.
John Skeleton.
Yeah, you don't know who's going to be the quarterback on that team, but you also know they have Larry Fitzgerald. They drafted Malcolm Floyd out of Notre Dame this season with their first-round draft pick.
As long as Beanie Wells is healthy.
They have 2 solid running backs, and then their defense also creates a lot of turnovers. That's big too because given a short field, that means a lot more opportunities for touchdowns. Also Larry Fitzgerald, one of the best pass-catching wide receivers in the NFL. If you're looking at a wide receiver to go to, man, I don't see how you can look past him because he's playing against such crappy secondaries. I mean, you look at them; they're playing against Seattle, they're playing against St. Louis. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind this guy shouldn't catch 10 balls a game. And if you're in a PPR league, I would definitely focus on a guy like Larry Fitzgerald who you can get towards in the second round because of the quarterback situation.
He could easily be the number 1 wide receiver in the entire NFL this year. In fact, I actually expect him to be the number 1 wide receiver because I know Calvin Johnson will not be the number 1 wide receiver. Calvin Johnson will not be number 1, guaranteed. Okay, so
Madden curse.
And move the Madden curse. That's all it takes right there, man. Yeah. He'll miss like 4 games due to injury, and then he'll be gone. And he won't be in the top number 1 overall. There's no way he could be number 1 if he misses half the season. So let's move on further down the list here. I really like Matt Schaub coming out of Houston again. I think the Houston and Chicago is a very probable Super Bowl. In fact, that's my preseason Super Bowl game right there is Houston against Chicago. A couple of sleeper teams there. I mean, going out on a limb here right now, I think those are both 2 really strong teams.
That's going to be tough to call because, Matt Schaub did miss significant time last season, but they do have Arian Foster, who will be the number 1 pick in all fantasy leagues across the board. That might help him a little bit. Again, Andre Johnson coming back from a foot injury, ankle injury. He's still a little gimpy. With the emergence of some other guys maybe stepping up, I don't really see Matt Schaub kind of continuing that surge he had, the start of last season. It's going to be more like the Matt Schaub of 2 seasons ago where he kind of underperformed and a little not value-wise he'll be up there. You can definitely grab him with 11th or 12th round as a solid backup, but don't look for this guy to really come in and show him what he had like last season. I mean, guy came in, was throwing 3-4 touchdown passes and got hurt. I look for this guy to hand the ball off at every opportunity he gets. Their defense is going to kind of slow teams down a little bit. So it's not going to be the shootout team here we're used to, the Texans that we're used to seeing.
All right, let's move down towards the bottom of the list here. Some guys that we try to view as like solid starters, like a Roethlisberger. Always want to draft that guy pretty high. And Andy Dalton coming off like sort of a surprise, pretty decent fantasy year last year. He's got on this based on these rankings here the lowest.
Yeah,
the toughest schedule in the NFL.
They have 2 of the toughest schedules.
Playing Pittsburgh and Baltimore is tough.
Andy Dalton's coming back from he's from a rookie season campaign where he led his team to the playoffs. Now he's in his sophomore year, and quarterbacks usually tend to digress a little bit. And then you look at Ben Roethlisberger, who's coming back again from injury. They said he played with a torn rotator cuff all of last season, and he also has a new offensive coordinator and Todd Haley. So he's learning a whole new playbook. So we don't even know if Mike Wallace is going to sign his contract yet. Their number 1 wide receiver in Pittsburgh. So it's going to be a little tough. I would stay away from a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, Andy Dalton, only because you can look to what they did last season, but I mean the the quarterback position in Pittsburgh is Ben Roethlisberger will always be number 1, but it's always tough to have him stay healthy. Week in and week out, he's always on that questionable list. And do you really want a quarterback playing at 75%? Because I sure as hell don't.
Okay, just to wind things up here, right here, Robbie. I think that a couple other guys here at the bottom of the list here you really have to watch out for are Joe Flacco in Baltimore for all the same reasons, the same schedule matchups that AFC division is going to have. I think you got to stay away from Flacco. And one guy that I'm really apprehensive here, he loses Vincent Jackson, is Phillip Rivers over there in San Diego. He seems to just have lost his Christmas that he has over the past couple years. And I think that losing Vincent Jackson is going to be tough for him. I still think that Antonio Gates is going to struggle through some of his plantar fasciitis injuries, even though reports out of camp are that he's doing great. I think that Gates is still a guy that you have to be very, very careful of. That injury could resurface at just about any time. We're going to skip the strength of the schedule for running backs. You guys are going to have to tune in next week to see these guys. And we had a viewer, Matt Vaughn, one of our good friends and sometimes guest analysts on the show, send us in a copy of a mock draft that he recently did. Robbie, we're going to spend this the rest of the show going through this mock draft here, breaking it down with no specific listings of who the players involved are. But Matt Vaughn does have one of these teams, Robbie. We'll get to it here, and I'll let you know who it is after we're done drafting here, and we'll see how he does. But let's start off with Team 1, the guy that drafted first. No surprise here, he takes Arian Foster. How do you do after he took Arian Foster?
You know what? The first pick is always tough, but he went with a running back again, and usually you go double running back first, second round. I've done it the last 2 seasons and still didn't learn from my mistake from 2 seasons ago. Did it last year, and it blew up right in my face. So I'm going to be a little skeptical in drafting these 2 running backs. I know he's got Ahmad Bradshaw, who tends to be, he's injury prone a little bit. He's a smaller running back. But he doesn't have to worry about Brandon Jacobs stealing his carries anymore in New York. So maybe that's a good play later in the second round.
But he's also got Eli Manning. You really want to put all your eggs in that basket?
And then I see a guy like Eli Manning in the 4th round, and then he gets Julio Jones, who was a rookie last season. I mean, there's really you really don't see a lot of experience on this team on his first 5 picks. And you have Miles Austin, his 5th round pick, who he's battling back from an injury as we speak. So that's
and he's
this
still
is
injured.
kind of. Yeah,
and then Kevin Smith, who's replacing an injured guy there in Detroit, because at some point Javid Best is going to be back.
So these first 6 rounds, the first 6 rounds of this guy's draft, a little bit to be desired because
he's got the best defense there with the 49ers, and a good kicker
but
with
we also know that defense and special teams and kickers don't really win you championships, especially in a league where you got a PPR league or touchdowns mean a lot more. I mean, Eli's going to throw for his.
The 7th and 8th rounds. That's too early.
It is way too early. So I would love to see how this team fares.
Yeah, in fact, look at his starting lineup. He rounded out his entire starting lineup in the first 9 picks. We always tell you guys on the show, never draft your entire starting lineup. You should have a bench running back before you have your kicker and defense.
Yeah, you're right.
And his bench here is interesting though. I like his backup running backs. I mean, these guys have potential. If Felix Jones, something happens to DeMarco Murray, or I don't like Felix Jones at all. Don't get me wrong. I don't advocate drafting anybody from Dallas this year because I just think that they're going to blow up and implode. But Michael Bush is an interesting pick because I think he can vulture some touchdown carries there in Chicago for Matt Forte.
Yeah.
And the rest of the team,
it really is.
Let's move on to team number 2 here. Why don't you break this one down?
You look at the first round pick, Ray Rice. I mean, you kind of got him a little too early, I thought. I mean, I'd probably take like LaShawn McCoy out of Philadelphia. But Ray Rice still a good pick, no doubt about it. And then you look at Larry Fitzgerald, 2nd round, got him with the 23rd overall pick. That's a fantastic pick, only because what we were talking about from earlier, the strength of schedule. Even though the quarterback position is not solidified in Arizona, I still like it because he's going to catch at least 90 to 110 balls. And then you look at Jamal Charles in the 3rd round.
Potential home run.
That's a huge pick. I know he tore his ACL last year, but you've got a legit 1,000-yard rusher who's going to get at least 15 touchdowns, if not more, in that Kansas City offense.
But you have to watch out the Peyton Hillis factor, I think, is a concern to a lot of people drafting this year.
Yeah, but I mean, I really wouldn't worry about that because even Peyton Hillis would tell you, too, he didn't have his best season last year, and maybe he's trying to make up for it, but I think the lack of his head wasn't in it.
Jamal Charles, Peyton Hillis. I mean, come on. We know better than that on this show.
Right. And then you have Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's coming off a great season last year. Last 5 games, he played exceptionally well. Kind of fizzled off in the playoffs. Didn't score any they didn't even score against the Giants, which is kind of sad. But he's looking to rebound. So I like that Matt Ryan pick. He plays on turf. They're going to throw the ball. They incorporated a no-huddle offense this season, so I like that. And then you have Steve Smith from Carolina. Great pick, too, because he's going to get a lot of garbage touchdowns, a lot of garbage yardage and receptions in Carolina because their defense is so bad. They're always going to be playing from behind as opposed to having a lead.
And then
so I like
what you do here with Robert Meacham. He has the number 1 wide receiver there in San Diego. So if Philip Rivers is able to return to form from last year.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really good team.
He's going to replace and get very comparable stats to Vincent Jackson.
And the Vernon Davis at 7th round. I mean, the 7th round pick, getting for a guy like Vernon Davis, we saw, like I said, again, the strength of schedule. They play the NFC West, who tends to have one of the worst secondaries in all of football. So with that being said, I mean, that's a fantastic value pick. 74th overall, the guy's going to at least get you 10-plus touchdowns.
The rest of this guy's bench, I don't think this guy knew what he was doing. I think he probably quit his draft after round 10 or something. The rest of his draft is really, really weak here. Except for maybe the Seahawks defense, but anybody can draft a defense in the 13th round. And we talk about on the show all the time. You really want to play the waiver wires, play matchups during the course of the regular season to really nail down your team defense for that week against whatever the worst possible offense and offensive line is for that given week. Moving on to team 3 here. This guy obviously got very excited about the quarterback position. He took Aaron Rodgers with the 3rd pick overall. You really can't fault him with that. I mean, look, Sean McCoy is still on the board. Depending on your scoring system, if you're in point per reception league, you really have to go to LaShawn McCoy here. This is really probably just a standard scoring system here where you're not getting points per reception, and that's what makes this Aaron Rodgers pick okay based on what we saw with strength of schedule. I think that's probably a little bit too high to take Aaron Rodgers here, Robbie. And then we move into the rest of this guy's draft. I think he's done pretty good here. He's got Fred Jackson coming off the injury. You never know how those guys can recover. Still, that stupid Spiller thing there is going to Spiller. But Richardson, a little bit of a knee injury, maybe not too much to worry about.
We hope not. I mean, you're right. You guys knee scoped last week, so hopefully it doesn't carry over to the season. But I like the wide receivers, and Percy Harvin and Torrey Smith are two guys. First of all, Minnesota doesn't have a great quarterback, and then Percy Harvin's also been plagued with injury bug. And then you look at Torrey Smith, a second-year guy. Joe Flacco's throwing the football. I mean, I know he's their deep target, but
tough matchup.
Kind of took him, really took him high with the 70th pick. And you look at
Darius Hayward-Bay on the bench.
But then you look at his bench. Yeah, Darius Hayward-Bay and Greg Little. I mean, two guys that did very minimal for their teams last year. You're kind of hoping that Carson Palmer and Hayward-Bay have this good connection, but the wide receivers on this guy's team aren't going to get it done.
So far through the first round here, Robbie, I see a bunch of guys that don't really know what they're doing with their late-round picks. And again, with those late-round picks, you guys, this is where you can win your drafts. You have to win your draft. Yeah, you can manage the waiver wire. I know a lot of times in these leagues, you'll see guys, when they draft their teams, their entire bench that they drafted is gone by the end of the season, and they've managed to complete waiver wire. You have to do that. You have to manage your team. But you can also get those guys before somebody has a chance to grab them off the waiver wire.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And now we're looking at Team 4 and the guy that drafted him 4th overall. And I have the 4th pick in my draft.
This team looks great.
I love it because Tony Romo in the 4th round is such a steal pick. He's going to get, and the guy's going to have a fantastic season. We got a lot of weapons out there. Well, that's all right. Hopefully Jason Witten comes back from injury. But you also have Dez Bryant, who I know is off season, off the field troubles a little bit, might question some guys. In fantasy, and it might kind of downturn that team. But I love LaShawn McCoy and Ryan Matthews for the first two rounds, and then Marcus Colston, Deshaun Jackson as a wide receiver. I mean, fantastic pick right there. And then Doug Martin is your hybrid. Drafting him in the 3rd round might have been kind of high, but judging from this guy's draft so far, you could take a gamble, and Doug Martin could be
out of the top 4 teams,
a Rookie of the Year candidate.
This guy's the best out of the top 4 rounds for sure. Matt Schaub is your bench quarterback. I mean, he might have your starter by the end of the year.
And Evan Royster could easily supplant Roy Lewis, the number 1 back in Washington.
For sure. Santonio Holmes solid, and then a kicker on Greg Olson's not really worth anything, but it's a last-round pick, so you can't really fault him there. So the next guy here wanted a quarterback, and he decided to go with Tom Brady over Drew Brees.
Yeah, well, you know what? I again, looking at the strength of the schedule, I would not have taken it.
But looking at their schedule on paper, it's an easy schedule.
But yeah, exactly. Nonetheless, they play the easiest schedule in the NFL, not yardage-wise, but team-wise. So Tom Brady, good pick, very solid. And then Rob Gronkowski, so taking him in the 2nd round, which is kind of tough because you have 2 teammates. You hope that they mesh well together this season. They can repeat the performance of last year. But again, it's going to be kind of tough. And then you're looking at Andre Johnson in the 3rd round. I mean, that's fantastic value right there. I'm looking at that. I'm like, holy hell, what were other guys thinking? Let him slip all the way down to 29, but okay. And then Beanie Wells and D'Angelo Williams. D'Angelo Williams, I don't really like the pick that much. But you look at his bench with Roy Lou, LeGarrette Blount, and Ben Tate.
Sure.
Arian Foster's one injury away from being out for the season, and Ben Tate could easily fetch some more touchdowns. So I like that pick.
This has the best bench I've seen so far.
It has and Kenny Britt too, 12th round. I mean, come on, man. I know he's coming back from a torn ACL, but
it's fine, man.
I love it.
Whatever he has, I mean, that's your bench wide receiver there. If you can get any kind of use out of him, like later on in the season, that's definitely a great draft pick. There in the 12th round, like you said, with one of your last draft picks, your last skill pull. And this guy did great. I mean, he took his kicker and defense rounds 13 and 14. That's what we talk about all the time on the show.
Yeah, you're right. And I think so. Now we're talking about the Team 6, and you look at the first 4 picks, man. Peyton Manning, Adrian Peterson, Darren Sproles, and Victor Cruz. 3 out of those 4 guys a year ago were top 2 rounds, top flight picks.
Well, those weren't his first 4 picks. His first 4 picks were Johnson.
I understand, but I'm looking at it as an advantage point to me because Adrian Peterson can come back healthy as ever. Darren Sproles is still, he's explosive.
But better in point per reception league, though.
Very good yeah, exactly, because Drew Brees is going to throw the ball a little bit, and he's going to find Sproles, and Sproles can also give you some points elsewhere. It could be a special teams league. We don't know. But then again, you have Mike Wallace and Calvin Johnson, 2 great wide receivers.
On the bench too.
And yeah, I like this guy's team as well. Teams 4 and team 6, and I mean even team 5.
I think between Manning and Cutler, you can have something pretty good here. Robbie, we're halfway through this team here. Let's burn through these last couple teams here real quickly. Roethlisberger is always a pretty safe one. Maybe his strength of schedule is a little bit tougher this year. Chris Johnson, yeah, we've both been talking about it. We love this guy to bounce back this year and have a really strong season. Greg Jennings, I'm a little concerned with because of his concussion and the fact that I just think that this guy is starting to reach that point where he starts to wane as a wide receiver. Stephen Ridley, yeah, who knows what to expect of that guy. It could be great. It could suck. I mean, we don't really know. This is a pretty good team on paper. I kind of like it. I like his bench. I think Freeman might end up being better than Roethlisberger this year. Bolden and Jackson, he's got a great bench of wide receivers there. So I think he'll be in contention for most of the playoffs. Let's move on to teammates.
Teammates pretty good, too. I like Steven Jackson, DeMarco Murray. Hopefully Jackson stays healthy. With Roddy White and Peyton Hillis as your flex. Fifth round, I would not have taken Peyton Hillis, but okay. Their bench with C.J. Spiller, and Jonathan Stewart, too. Good picks.
Okay, Team 9 did great here getting Drew Brees with the 9th pick overall. I love his second running back there with Matt Forte. A.J. Green, Brandon Lloyd could be a potential great long shot. Same thing with Pierre Garçon. So I think Team 9 is very, very solid here.
Team 10, a little under the ordinary, taking Robert Griffin III as their quarterback. You really don't know what to expect from this guy. Then Antonio Brown, too.
But the rest of the starters are really solid there.
Yeah, they're okay. Jones Drew and Marshawn Lynch. I'm not a big fan of Marshawn Lynch. I like Hakeem Nicks if he can stay healthy. Frank Gore as well. So not bad.
I think it's a pretty good team. I like it. Yeah, again, big problems with the quarterback position there. Cam Newton, that's the ultimate risk-reward pick right there. Reggie Bush, Darren McFadden, both, I mean, especially McFadden, risk-reward, great. Could be a potentially great pick there. First round, yeah, maybe you have to go with him there. I don't really see anything wrong with it. Welker, yeah, very solid PPR. Nelson, yeah, it's okay receivers, nothing really that exciting there.
Yeah, Team 12, Matthew Stafford, and that's about it on this team. Maybe Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker with Peyton Manning as well. Looks pretty good, and Jimmy Graham. But and then you have Michael Vick on your bench. Who knows? Could pay dividends.
Yeah. So anyway, Matt Vaughn's team was that Peyton Manning team there, which you kind of like there. We'll see how he does. I think his quarterbacks. I think he could do pretty good. I think Cutler will actually end up being his quarterback there. We'll see what happens. But good breaking it down with you, Robbie.
Yeah, definitely.
Great show, man. Next week we'll come back to you guys. We'll have more mock drafts to go through. We will also get back to you guys with the running back strength of schedule, which we'll have plenty of time for next week to get to you. We'll start off the show with that next week. We'll have all the action from the preseason games. Robbie, good to see you again. We got a lot of football games to watch.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Carpool, here we come. And we'll see all you guys next time on Fantasy Sports Review. Goodbye, everybody.